If your life feels like it's collapsing right now, don't panic. This is not destruction. It's recalibration. When several doors close at the same time, when familiar relationships suddenly feel distant, when silence replaces connection, this isn't random. You're standing at the edge of what psychology calls ego collapse. But at a deeper level, this is a timeline correction. What you're experiencing is not punishment. It's preparation. The pressure, the confusion, the isolation. They are signals. Your old timeline has expired, and the system has initiated an update. Pay attention now, because moments like this don't happen to everyone, and they are never accidental. Today, we're not here for comfort. We're not here for motivation. And we're definitely not here for the kind of positivity that asks you to smile while your inner world is collapsing. What we're about to do is something different. We're going to dissect the structure of what I call the prophetic timeline, a pattern that consistently appears in individuals who were never meant to blend in, never meant to live quietly, and never meant to remain asleep inside systems built on denial. There is a reason you've always felt out of place, a reason why social environments feel draining instead of nourishing, a reason why people react to you, sometimes with admiration, sometimes with hostility, even when you haven't said a single word. That reaction isn't about your behavior, it's about your presence. Systems, whether families, workplaces, or social hierarchies, are designed to maintain balance. And when someone carries clarity, authenticity, or unprocessed truth, the system detects it as a disruption. Not because you're doing something wrong, but because you don't fit the distortion. We are approaching a fracture point, a moment where old rules stop working, old identities dissolve, and old coping mechanisms fail. This is the stage where confusion peaks and meaning begins to emerge. Over the next several minutes, I'm going to walk you through the internal map of this transition, why your isolation has lasted longer than expected, why your nervous system feels like it's under constant recalibration, and most importantly, what waits on the other side of this disorientation. Here's something you need to hear clearly. Most people will not be able to follow you where you're going, not because you're superior, but because clarity threatens those who survive through illusion. And this is the first acceptance point of this journey. That loss of alignment does not mean loss of value. Those who can stand in your clarity without trying to dim it. Those who don't feel challenged by your presence. Those are the ones who belong in the next phase of your life. Take a breath. We're not here to escape the collapse. We're here to understand it. And once you understand it, you stop being afraid of it. To understand where you're going, you have to decode where you are right now. And the first, most brutal marker of this timeline is isolation. Not temporary loneliness, not needing space for a few weeks, but a deep, prolonged separation that feels deliberate, almost surgical. You may have noticed a repeating pattern. You try to connect. You soften yourself, you explain, you compromise, and yet the result is always the same. Misunderstanding, betrayal, distance, or a cold rejection that arrives without warning. This isn't bad luck, and it isn't because you're doing something wrong. At a psychological level, your presence functions like a mirror. When you enter a space, you don't need to speak to activate it. Your authenticity alone reflects back the parts of others they've spent years avoiding. Their insecurity, their self-deception, their unresolved wounds. You don't expose them. You don't confront them. You simply exist. And that existence is enough to destabilize fragile identities. What you're witnessing, gossip, subtle hostility, emotional withdrawal, character assassination, is not a response to your actions. It's a defense mechanism, a way for them to preserve the illusion they rely on to feel safe. Removing you from the picture allows them to avoid facing themselves. This is where most people internalize the wrong conclusion. They assume isolation means rejection, that being alone means being defective. But here is the truth: most never reach. This isolation is not a flaw in the process. It is the process. Think of it as biological quarantine. Before a new operating system is installed, the system disconnects from outdated networks to prevent data corruption. You are being severed from old psychological contracts, unspoken agreements you made with family, friends, and society in exchange for belonging. Contracts that required you to shrink, to perform, to tolerate misalignment for the sake of peace. Those contracts cannot survive where you're going, so something larger intervenes. The space around you begins to clear, not gently, not politely, but efficiently. The silence feels unbearable because it strips away distraction. There's no one left to project onto, no one left to perform for, no one left to blame or please. You're left alone with yourself. And that is exactly the point. Nothing forces self-confrontation like solitude. This is why attempts to fix the isolation fail. You can reach out. You can explain. You can apologize for things that were never your fault. And still, nothing changes. Because the isolation isn't meant to be negotiated. It's meant to complete its function. Every bridge being burned right now is intentional, not as punishment, but as prevention. You are being cut off from paths that would allow you to retreat into familiar suffering instead of stepping forward into the unknown. Pay close attention to who disappears without explanation, who turns distant when you stop overgiving, who becomes uncomfortable when you stop justifying yourself. Absence is information. It reveals who was connected to your energy, not your essence. The people who exit during this phase aren't evil. They're incompatible. They cannot tolerate the frequency you're stabilizing into because it threatens the identity they've built to survive. And that incompatibility is not something you can heal for them. Here's the hardest truth of this phase. You cannot take everyone with you. Trying to do so will drain the very energy this transition requires. Explaining yourself to those committed to misunderstanding you is a misuse of your most valuable resource, attention. The isolation feels cruel because the ego interprets it as abandonment. But the deeper intelligence behind this process understands something the ego doesn't. You cannot enter a new timeline carrying unresolved attachments to the old one. This space around you, this emptiness, is not a void. It's a container, a protected environment where recalibration can occur without interference, where your nervous system can decompress from years of hypervigilance, where your identity can dissolve without being interrupted by external expectations. Do not rush to fill the silence. Do not chase noise. Let the quiet do its work. Because when this phase completes, the connections that form next will not require you to explain yourself, betray yourself, or abandon yourself to be accepted. They will recognize you without effort. Isolation is not where you are being abandoned. It's where you are being prepared. And preparation rarely feels gentle when it's real. Once you stop resisting the isolation, something else begins to surface. Changes that are harder to explain, not just emotionally, but physically. This is where many people start to doubt themselves. You may feel an exhaustion that doesn't match your lifestyle. Days where your body feels heavier, slower, as if gravity itself has increased. You sleep longer than usual and still wake up drained. Or the opposite happens. You wake suddenly in the early hours of the morning, heart alert, mind active, unable to return to rest. This isn't laziness, and it isn't a lack of discipline. What's happening is neurological recalibration. Your nervous system is adjusting to a higher level of internal awareness. Old survival patterns, hypervigilance, people-pleasing, emotional suppression are losing their function. And systems that have been overworked for years don't shut down quietly. They release tension. They release memory. They release stored stress that was never safe enough to surface before. Trauma is not only psychological, it's biological. It lives in muscle tone, breath patterns, digestion, and posture. And when the external environment finally slows down, when isolation removes constant stimulation, the body takes the opportunity to process what it's been carrying. This is why emotions may arrive without context. Sadness with no story, anger with no target, grief that feels older than your current life. You're not regressing, you're integrating. At the psychological level, a more unsettling shift begins. Identity dissolution. Things that once defined you, roles, routines, ambitions, even relationships, start to feel empty. Activities you used to enjoy lose their charge. Entertainment feels hollow. Conversations feel scripted. You may look at your life and think, this doesn't fit anymore. That thought is destabilizing because the ego relies on continuity. It wants labels. It wants certainty. It wants to know who you are so it can predict how to survive. But this phase is not about maintaining identity. It's about stripping away what was never authentic. The ego panics here. It clings to old definitions, the reliable one, the strong one, the helper, the achiever. But these identities were often built as adaptations, not expressions of truth. And adaptations expire when they're no longer needed. This is also when your tolerance for dishonesty drops sharply. Conversations that once felt neutral now feel invasive. Politeness without sincerity becomes physically uncomfortable. You may notice immediate bodily reactions, tightness in the chest, nausea, shallow breathing, when someone speaks from a place of manipulation or avoidance. This isn't hypersensitivity, it's precision. Your system is becoming attuned to coherence. What aligns feels calm. What doesn't creates friction. This is your internal guidance system sharpening, not to judge others, but to protect your energy. At this point, pause for a moment. Don't analyze this. Don't label it. Just notice what your body is doing as you hear this. That awareness, right there, is the skill being developed. If at any point these symptoms feel overwhelming or unmanageable, seeking professional support is not a failure of strength. Stability is part of integration. As the old identity loosens its grip, there may be moments where reality itself feels unreal, a sense of distance, of watching your life rather than living it. This can be frightening if you don't understand it. But this is not disconnection from reality. It's disconnection from a false alignment. You are withdrawing energy from narratives that were built to keep you functioning, not fulfilled. And when those narratives collapse, there's a brief gap, a liminal space where nothing feels solid. That space is not madness, it's transition. The mistake many people make here is trying to immediately fix the discomfort, to distract, to numb, to force clarity before it's ready. But clarity can't be rushed. It emerges when the system stabilizes at its new baseline. Your only responsibility in this phase is regulation. Slow your breath. Reduce unnecessary stimulation. Create moments of physical safety. Walking, stillness, nature, silence. You are teaching your nervous system that it no longer has to stay on guard. This phase does not mean you are broken. It means something in you is finally allowed to reorganize without constant interference. The confusion is temporary. The sensitivity is purposeful. And the fatigue is the cost of shedding years of misalignment. You are not losing yourself. You are losing what you were never meant to be. And once this recalibration completes, the next phase will not require effort. It will require discernment. Because what comes next is not about healing anymore, it's about direction. Everything you've endured up to this point leads here. Not to an ending, but to a reorientation. This is where the pain stops being something you survive and starts becoming something that informs your direction. When I use the term prophetic, I'm not talking about mysticism or prediction. I'm talking about consequence at its highest resolution. When you change your internal frequency, your patterns, your boundaries, your tolerance, you don't get the same outcomes anymore. The system has to respond differently. This is the prophetic timeline. It's the point where cause and effect finally make sense. One of the first shifts you'll notice is a quiet return of power. Not dominance, not control, but a grounded authority that doesn't need permission. For a long time, you may have felt like life was happening to you. Family dynamics, toxic workplaces, manipulative relationships, circumstances that kept backing you into corners. What becomes clear now is that those pressures were not random. They forced you to develop internal strength long before you were allowed to use it. Every boundary violation trained your discernment. Every betrayal refined your perception. Every moment of powerlessness pushed you inward, where real authority is built. This power doesn't announce itself. It stabilizes. You stop over-explaining. You stop proving. You stop negotiating your worth. And paradoxically, this is when others begin to respect you. Not because you demand it, but because you no longer need it. Not everyone listening is at the same point. If this makes immediate sense to you, you already know why. The second shift is the collapse of emotional scarcity. Many people who go through prolonged isolation develop a belief that connection is something to earn or chase, that love, opportunity, or recognition must be pursued aggressively or sacrificed for. That belief dissolves here. When you become emotionally self-sufficient, when you stop outsourcing validation, you change what you attract. You're no longer compatible with dynamics built on need, imbalance, or performance. Opportunities begin to align instead of resist. Conversations feel mutual instead of draining. Relationships form without you having to abandon yourself. This is also where synchronicities increase. Repeating numbers, unexpected meetings, ideas arriving fully formed. These aren't signs meant to impress you. They're feedback. Indicators that your internal state and external environment are starting to synchronize. Nothing magical. Just coherence. But before this timeline fully locks in, there is always a final test. This is the part most people misinterpret. Just as you gain clarity, the past resurfaces. An old relationship reaches out. A former friend wants to reconnect. A job or opportunity you once wanted reappears. The timing feels deliberate. And it is. This is not reward. It's assessment. The system is asking one question. Have you actually changed, or are you still emotionally bonded to what once defined you? If you return out of nostalgia, guilt, or familiarity, the cycle resets. Not as punishment, but because the lesson wasn't completed. But if you hold your boundary, if you recognize the test for what it is, the new timeline stabilizes. This is where many hesitate. The familiar is tempting, even when it was painful. The known feels safer than the unknown, even when the unknown carries growth. But remember this, you are not being called back because the past suddenly values you. You are being called back because your absence changed the dynamic. Your clarity became noticeable, and what once ignored you can no longer do so. You are not obligated to respond. You are not required to prove you've moved on. The only thing being evaluated is your alignment. Do not return to environments that require you to shrink. Do not reopen doors that closed to protect you. You cannot fit into identities that no longer exist. You're not becoming someone new. You're becoming someone accurate. And once this phase completes, your life won't feel louder or more dramatic. It will feel simpler, more precise. Because from this point forward, you're no longer reacting to circumstances. You're choosing direction. And that is what makes this timeline irreversible. Understanding without action leads nowhere. Insight becomes power only when it's embodied. And this phase requires precision, not force. What follows is not advice. It's a protocol. Simple, contained, effective. For the next 30 days, your role is not to fix your life. It's to stabilize your position inside it. The first directive is strategic absence. Stop explaining yourself. Stop over-clarifying your intentions. Stop trying to be understood by people who are committed to misunderstanding you. Silence is not weakness here. It's compression. When you withdraw unnecessary communication, you reclaim energy that was being leaked through justification and defense. Let your absence do the filtering. Those who valued access to you will feel the gap. Those who benefited from your availability will react with irritation. Both responses are data. Do not announce this withdrawal. Do not dramatize it. Just step back. The second directive is nervous system mastery. You cannot maintain a new trajectory with a system trained for constant threat. Your body needs evidence that it is safe to slow down. This doesn't require extreme practices. It requires consistency. Each day, create a short window without input. No phone, no noise, no performance. 5 minutes is enough. Walk, sit, breathe. Let your body experience stillness without interruption. This is how regulation is learned, not through effort, but through repetition. Calm is not passive. Calm is containment. The third directive is observation over absorption. When disruption appears, and it will, resist the urge to personalize it. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" shift to, "What does this reveal about the system I'm interacting with?" Observation preserves agency. Reaction gives it away. Watch patterns. Notice timing. Pay attention to who re-enters your life and under what circumstances. You don't need to confront. You don't need to explain. Awareness alone alters outcomes. During this phase, your task is not to save anyone. It's not to correct misinformation. And it's not to manage other people's emotional responses. Your only responsibility is internal stability. When you hold your center, the external environment reorganizes around it. Opportunities clarify. Misalignments expose themselves. Decisions become simpler because you're no longer negotiating against yourself. This protocol isn't about control. It's about coherence. Follow it quietly, without announcement, without urgency. Because the more stable you become, the less effort is required to move forward. And what comes next won't need chasing. It will recognize you. This transition isn't a single moment. It's a process. And right now, you're standing in the most critical phase of it. There may still be fear. There may still be uncertainty. And there may be moments where the silence feels heavier than the chaos you left behind. But pause for a moment and look at what you've already survived. You endured environments that required you to stay alert just to remain intact. You carried emotional weight that wasn't meant for you. You faced internal conflicts most people never acknowledge, let alone confront. And you're still here. You weren't chosen because you're flawless. You were chosen because you could withstand truth without turning away from it. That capacity, to see clearly without collapsing, is what brought you this far. And now, it's what allows you to release what you've been carrying. Let what's outdated fall away. Not with anger, not with regret, but with precision. Stand still in the center of the uncertainty. Observe instead of rushing forward. The need to escape is often the last reflex of an identity that no longer fits. You don't need to move yet. You need to remain aligned. Because once the dust settles, what remains will not be a new version of you. It will be the accurate one. The people who can stand in your clarity without trying to dim it will find you. They always do. Not through effort, but through alignment. Anyone threatened by your presence was never meant to continue with you. If this message arrived at the exact moment you needed it, if something in you recognized itself here, leave a sign below. Not for validation, not for visibility, but to mark that you're present in this timeline. Don't explain, don't justify, just acknowledge. We'll meet again on the other side of this phase. Until then, stay precise, stay